Today, we're heading to an often overlooked tramp in our most popular national park, Abel Tasman. Let's talk about the Abel Tasman Inland Track. Kia ora and welcome to The Tramping Life, a podcast about hiking in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or as we call it here, tramping. I'm Chauncey, and in this episode I'll talk about a specific track or hut. I'll give an overview and share my experience, along with the highlights and some practical advice. The Abel Tasman Inland Track is a 41-kilometre tramp through the interior of Abel Tasman National Park, typically walked over 2 to 3 days. It can be combined with the much more popular coast track for a full circuit of the park. As the name suggests, this track stays inland along the forested spine of the national park. It climbs steadily to around 900 metres above sea level near Gibbs Hill, the highest point in the park. It is rougher, steeper and more physically demanding than the coast track, and it offers quite a different experience away from the Great Walk crowds. Day one from Marahau to Castle Rock Hut is 5.5 hours and 15 kilometres. From Marahau, the tramp follows the coast track to Tin Line Bay. Here the inland track begins, climbing steadily away from the coast and then steeply through regenerating forest. After 2.5 hours, Holyoake clearing is reached. There's a cute 2-bunk shelter. Above the clearing, the track enters forest and continues climbing to the 8-bunk Castle Rock Hut. This sits near rock outcrops with wide views of the Marahau Valley and Tasman Bay. Day 2 is from Castle Rock Hut to Awapoto Hut, which is 6 hours and 13k. This is a day of undulating terrain through bush, with some views at lookouts, including Porter Rock. It's a couple of hours to the heritage Murray Park shelter. Awapoto Hut is a 12-bunk gem of a hut with attractive views. Day 3 takes you from there to Wainui Car Park via Pigeon Saddle, 5.5 hours, 13k. This involves heading up Gibbs Hill for the best views of the whole park, and then the track descends to rejoin the coast track and then on to Wainui Car Park. I walked it a while ago now, but I still remember it, particularly for the tree routes. If you like tree routes and a good workout, but aren't too interested in views, this is the track for you. Rather than hug the coast, it heads up and over the Tasman Mountains, a more direct but tougher route. I did push things though by walking it over 2 rather than the more usual 3 days. It is far less busy than the coast track. Even at the start of December, I saw no one on the track in 10 hours of walking and only a couple of people at the huts. This is for 2 good reasons though. Firstly, it's much harder than the coast track. Despite being 14 kilometres shorter, the track climbs over 1,000 metres compared with around 200 metres on the coastal track, and the path mainly consists of tree roots and mud. Secondly, it's nowhere near as scenic, with few views other than at the start and end, when on sections shared with the coast track. I started the track from Marahau and shared the coastal track for the first half an hour around to Tin Line Bay. It's obvious when you start the inland track itself, as the path halves in width and heads uphill continuously for the next near 6 kilometres, with the occasional stunning view back reminding you of why you're doing this. Unfortunately, there weren't many more of these views for the next 8 hours. The Holyoake clearing shelter made a good lunch stop, and there's a couple of mattresses inside, so you could stay the night. I had much further to go though before being able to sleep, further than I really appreciated at the time. The next 6.5k to Castle Rocks was far harder, with gnarly tree roots everywhere and 0 views other than endless bush. There was a small obstacle soon after leaving the shelter in the form of a massive tree trunk across the track, which required a bit of scrambling around. Castle Rock's hut was the perfect place for a much-needed rest, set in a nice clearing. It was small but tidy inside, but I had to force myself on as I had another 13 kilometres to go and it was already 4 p.m. Comments in the hut visitor book recommended the short side trip to Porter Rock, which helped me get my bearings and appreciate the scale of the forest around me, as did a viewpoint a little bit further along the track. Murray Park Shelter is an old-school hut set in a brief respite from bush, although the interior had clearly seen better days. Between here and the hut was a huge amount of devastation from numerous storms over the years, resulting in many felled trees despite their enormous roots. Awapoto Hut was a very welcome sight, which I reached at 8:30 p.m, just before the sun set. I wasn't in the hut for long though, as I had a 5:45 a.m. start the next day to finish the track in order to meet with my transport. The 5 kilometre to Pigeon Saddle was mostly more scrambling up and over tree root covered hillside, although there were some welcome views. The final 8 kilometre stretch to Wainui was far easier thankfully, mainly as it rejoined the coast track just after Gibbs Hill. The hill offered panoramic views, but better were had heading down towards Wainui, where an early lunch at 11 a.m. and a 3-hour bus journey back to Nelson Airport beckoned. There were more impressive views from the bus than the track as it headed over Tartaka Hill. The inland track is certainly a good workout, particularly pushing yourself to do it in 2 rather than 3 days, but it was one of the less interesting tramps I've done. The coast track shows Abel Tasman National Park at its best, just avoid doing it over the summer months when it's swarming with people. There were a few highlights of the inland track, mainly the contrast with the coast. Whilst most visitors to Abel Tasman stick to the beaches and water taxis, this track offered long stretches of quiet bushwalking. It offered a sense of solitude in a busy national park, with a huge contrast between the coast and inland track in terms of the number of walkers. And finally, the huts all have character and are diverse in size and design. To finish with some practical advice, none of the huts require booking, which is becoming a rarity, but during popular times of the year it would be wise to carry a tent. This isn't a loop track, so plan how you'll get back, although as it starts and finishes at the same places as the full version of the coast track, there are many shuttle options. Finally, this is much more of a tramp than the coast track, so come prepared for decent climbs and slippery tree routes. Hiking poles are recommended. Thank you so much for listening to The Tramping Life. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast in whatever app you use. Tell a friend about it and consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps more people discover the show. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email at thetrampinglife, one word, @gmail.com.